Happy Wednesday, everyone. Match play is back. Spencer, how's it going? Eventful week in golf. Quite the chaos on Twitter with the merger. This tournament is maybe not as exciting as the news that we've been getting this week, but how's it going?
Everything's going well. Do you have thoughts on this merger between everything?
And my only thoughts are that I think the expectation was this was going to happen. I just didn't expect it to happen this soon. So we'll see if it plays. Some of these guys, I think the emotions might get to them from everything that's going on. But we'll see how it goes. What about you?
I don't know. I've said this a couple times recently, and I could be wrong on this, and I don't really know what's going on. But to me, a couple things happened here. I'm sure there's some legal battles that the PGA Tour knew that they were going to lose, and they decided to just end this whole thing with it. But I don't know. Koepka wins a major. All of a sudden, Monahan caves with this.
Yeah.
That has to at least be noteworthy, the timing of that. And then to me, it kind of seems like we replaced Greg Norman and now Monahan is in charge. And I'm not really sure, they're not live, but they might do team events, but they also don't agree with anything that live has ever done before. But now all the live people are in there. So it doesn't make any sense to me. We can say it is what it is with it. There's a lot of hypocrisy that's going on with always with it. And that's why I respect somebody like Harold Varner. Varner said it how it was. He said he's taking the money, dislike him for it, like him for it, whatever the situation is. He was forthcoming with his answers there. And I feel like he's about the only person that we've had so far that is giving truthful answers here.
Very straightforward. He will probably go back to taking a lot of my money as well. Look forward to that. I think some guys probably, the guys that didn't take the money probably are, if you want to say, losers in this, fine. We'll see how this all plays out. But again, I think there's a lot of gray areas still, and we don't know exactly what's going on.
I feel bad for golfers like Hideki.
Zalatoris
is the really bad one there with now the injury that he has. I'm sure Fleetwood and, Fitzpatrick and even Jason Day, I'm sure all those guys would have loved to have taken the money. That's a lot of money that they turned down. And we don't know for each person, each deal was different with them. But I feel for them and for somebody like Zalatoris, who now has the injury on top of it. It's a life-changing amount of money. And I know he's a talented golfer that will make a bunch of money throughout his career, but you don't get $100 million offered to you like that all the time. So, for whatever the reason is that they turned it down, I hope for them it had more to do with their beliefs in things rather than trusting Monahan in this situation. But the problem that you have now is a lot of those people that you were saying you didn't want to play for are now in the picture. So, it's a circus. It's been a circus for the last couple of years.
There's going to be a lot of backtracking. It's going to be, they deserved a little bit of probably a heads up instead of finding out these guys are at the tournament out in Oakdale. So we'll see if it plays a piece into this.
One question before we move on, because I'm curious your thoughts here. Do you think Rory knew? I know we say that he did not know. That's the going sentiment around this space. Do you think Rory knew before it was announced?
It sounded like he knew there were conversations going on. So I think whether people believed that it was actually going to occur is one thing. I think more people had an idea than they're probably letting everyone believe.
I would give the same answer, and we can end it on that.
Yes. Those type of things don't just come up out of nowhere. Let's talk about everyone's favorite tournament, the Canadian Open. Why don't you give us a little brief course preview of this potential birdie fest, maybe?
Yes, so we have Oakdale Golf and Country Club, 7,264 yards, par 72. It's a mixture of a few different textures on these greens. Stephie, all the unknown commodities are my worst case scenario when running a model. We have inconsistent yardage expectations at the track is going to be 7,264 yards, although I've read that it can play up to 200 yards more than this on any given day. I did watch a ton of flyover videos on YouTube to see if I could find anything unique and different than what the general public is saying about the track. Sometimes little things will stick out to me when you look at the lay of the land, but I think unfortunately in this spot, most gamblers or most handicappers or DFS players, or however you want to call them, probably got a lot of this correct with how the course is going to play. There are 8 par 4 holes that stretch between 354 to 432 yards. That highlights short iron play and the need to make putts. I also noticed what likely turns into an increased demand for par 5 birdie or better percentage. You only have 3 at the property, but each looks reachable in 2 shots. We've heard some answers recently from caddies and players that this may not be the 20 under, 25 under, 30 under test that we initially thought. I hear players saying that they think now, because of the thick rough, this could be 13 under to 15 under. I know Vegas put the over under when it opened at 17 and a half. I just don't know. Like, to me, you have a really short par 5 that's going to be super gettable. I think, as I said, all the par 5s are reachable in 2 shots. When you have 8 par 4s that are going to be sub, let's say 435 yards, yeah, you can alter the distances a little bit, but we'll call it 435 here. It's going to be a lot of short iron proximity. And you can make an argument that maybe these more challenging holes will take some of the scores back from the player, and maybe this ends up being more in that 17 to 22 under range for that reason. But I think that's kind of the key answer to all of this. Like, you have to be very careful when you run a model. I think for betting, it's a little bit trickier because when you make a massive deviation, it can move the price or how somebody grades in your model exponentially. For DFS, it's a little bit different. Like, yes, the same thing comes into play, but you have this game theory answer that you'll always know. Like, we cannot know what the course is going to necessarily be, but I can tell you more or less what ownership is going to look like on sites like DraftKings and FanDuel. And that kind of can generate that game theory optimal route that you're looking for by trying to get unique. So I am never like the person that necessarily, like, I'm much more aggressive than most people would be in these spots. Like, I'm going to stick to what I believe is the correct answer, and I'm going to run it aggressively in that sense. But you always run the risk when you do that, like, you kind of just get wiped away if you run this the complete wrong way with a model. So I'm going to have very limited exposure to this tournament. I know you and I have talked about it before we've even started this show that we don't have a ton that we like. Like, if I'm comparing these bets, like even the ones I'm going to talk about here, I'll be completely transparent and say they're in like the bottom 5 or 10% of wagers that we've talked about on this show in the past. Doesn't mean we don't have an edge. Doesn't mean that we can't try to, hit some winners here. But like the head-to-head play that I bet this week, you need to be about 52.5% with that built-in juice that's already in there. Like, I have it at like 55% being the actual price for it. So we're talking about like 2% margins. And a lot of times I can find like 8-9% for some of my favorite plays. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's very small margins for a course that we have no stats on. And like, it shows throughout all boards here. Like, there's just not a ton of value to me.
Yeah, and it could end up being one of those weeks where it's like, oh, maybe we should have expected that to happen.
Yeah.
You look at the top of the board where we are seeing week after week, this is where, these guys that are winning are coming from.
Yep.
You've got Rory, Hatton, Fitzy, Burns, Young, Corey Connors, Rose, Lowry. Are you leaning towards taking the top of the board for this tournament? Because I feel like it probably is a safer strategy as far as this tournament goes.
You kind of worded it best, Stephie. Like, these boards continue to yield that same answer of one of these reduced options winning every single event. And I wasn't necessarily going to get to Hovland last week. Like, you were on him. I wasn't. I thought 40-something to 1 was more proper for him. And, that's fine. But the point still remains that we're getting reduced options. And there's a lot of plays this season. Like, I can think of Siwoo when he won at the Sony, Justin Rose at Pebble Beach, Corey Connors at the Valero. Can make the argument for Jason Day when he won a couple weeks ago. Maybe not so much Jason Day. I just like including him into all my answers here.
Okay.
But
we know.
Yes, but the point to that is there's a lot of value that I've had on these boards that I haven't realized because I'm a person that jumps into this 40 to 1, 50 to 1, 60 to 1 plus sort of range. And I'm trying to find value down the board. Like, my answer is always value, but some of those times the answer of value has shifted some of these players like Justin Rose and Siwoo Kim to where I did have value at the top. I just didn't want to take on the exposure that I needed to make that wager. I'm taking a different approach this week. I am going to go to the top. I am stacking my card up here. I'm doing it in a really gross way, Stephie. Like,
oh man,
like, I think I have a problem at this point, like a legitimate problem. Like, I have more than daddy problems in this Who's Your Daddy contest.
Like, we might have to start having a therapy session, like an intervention. Things are getting serious now.
Yes,
I'm worried about you.
There's a couple players that I can't seem to get off. Like, for a long time, it was Jason Day and Brian Harmon and Webb Simpson. And I've gotten rid of those guys. You would think I'm clean now with the spot, but no, now it's Cameron Young.
Every single week,
Cameron, every single week.
That's why I honestly I didn't even put a single note about Cameron. I just had a feeling that was going to be the direction that you went. I think it's a solid direction, honestly. I think that people are looking away from him this week for a very good reason.
Yeah.
But what do you like about him this week?
I think when you look at what he's done recently, like obviously 4 tournaments in a row of not coming in the top 50 is alarming. But when you need an outright bet here, like you're shooting for upside. I always say this, a second place finish is as good as a miscut. I'm trying to find this potential in my model, and there's a couple ways of how I ran my data that kind of skyrocketed him up my list. And I'll talk about another player here, the other one near the top that I'm betting, where this was kind of the same answer that I'd given when we talked about the actual match play tournament. I guess the one that we put out of business after we started this show. But if you remember, Stephie, there were a couple players for me in the match play contest that I really liked. I loved Cameron Young.
And you like Sam Burns.
I like Sam Burns, and I liked Max Homa.
That's right.
I wish Max Homa was here. I think Max Homa would win this contest if he was at this tournament. And it's unfortunate he's not in this event. But really what it came down to for why I like those two players so much is I created this category in my model, and there has to be a better way to word it than this. Like this is kind of a tongue twister that makes no sense to anybody, but I called it expected realization of opportunities created. It's a lot of words there that doesn't necessarily mean anything to everybody listening, but essentially what that looks at is it takes how often somebody will generate a birdie look and then capitalize on it by making a putt. So that doesn't necessarily mean that bad putters get ignored. It doesn't mean that bad approach players necessarily get ignored. What it's trying to find is, can you create an opportunity? How often are you creating the opportunity? And then what's the frequency that you make that putt from between 5 to 15 feet?
Okay.
Cantlay. I know we don't want to talk about him on this show. He was the other one on match play that went through, but like there was 4 players that really skyrocketed in my model. And look, I could be wrong about the way that this tournament is being held, and maybe it ends up being a 13 under winner, and some of this doesn't end up necessarily holding as much credence as I thought it did with the time of me building it right now. But Sam Burns, Cameron Young, like those are the 2 finalists when I ran a model like that. And I just think there's a lot of similarities of like, you need to make putts here, and you're going to need to make putts from 5 to 15 feet. And Cameron Young is the ultimate choice in that answer because he's the number 1 player for me in weighted proximity. It's why I liked him at St. Andrews at the Open Championship. It's why I liked him at the match play. Create the opportunities. And then when you put him from 5 to 15 feet for however bad of a putter he is, and he's a bad putter, and he lost nearly 6 shots putting last week, he's the number 7 player in my model for that expected realization, just because he's creating such a sheer amount of opportunities compared to the rest of the field. So my hope is that through the total driving that he brings to the table, which yes, you have inaccuracy, I'm hoping that that's going to be somewhat ignored. He was inside the top 15 there, number 1 for birdie or better percentage, inside the top 5 for par 5 scoring. Number 1 for me in a lot of those short, like 150 minus that, like 0 to 150. I think Cameron Young's upside is really tantalizing here. And for me, there's a reason why this price is floating in that 16, 17 to 1 range when a lot of people think he should be like 30 to 1. I understand that, but I'm going to bet on the upside here.
I'm with you on that. And Sam Burns maybe just hurt my feelings for, beating Scotty. And I think that his putter will eventually be the downfall if he doesn't, find success here. But I think if you look at the top of the board, if we're looking at it, and that's where we're going to bet, you have to find value. I don't know that you're finding a lot of value this week, but I struggle to, go to a Rory and bet him, sub 500. To me, that's really hard to do. And I think a lot of people are going to struggle with that this week. Where are you at with, I'll ask you one more before we do smash or pass about the top of this board. Where are you at with Rose?
I don't know. I mean, like, obviously when I like everybody that's more or less like, I'm lower on Shane Lowry. I'm lower on Thagala. If you want to say like everybody that's not those 2 that are like sub 30 to 1, they grade well in my model. Like they're going to be top 12 caliber players. And you kind of can pick and choose your spots here. And I drew the line in the sand with, I'm going to take Sam Burns. I'm going to take Cameron Young, which means I'm not going to take some of these other names. I probably prefer a Rose or a Fleetwood, or maybe one of those guys in like a top 20 sort of a wager, I guess, like something safer than to win the tournament. I think you have general safety with a lot of these names. Like there were 13 players for me, essentially, that graded inside the top 50 of all 6 categories that I ran this week. And I won't name all the players here, but I mean, it's going to be all the players near the top. It's Rory, it's Burns, Hatton, Fitzpatrick, Connors, Rose, Fleetwood, Cameron Young. Like it's all the names that you're expecting. And I do think one of those players probably most likely wins this event. I think the sleeper here for me is Keith Mitchell. I really like some of the metrics that he has. And I think that I know the results. It's kind of like the Cameron Young answer where the results do not look good. You're not going to look at what he's done recently and say, wow, this is a guy ready to pop right now. But from a course specific fit, and that's really the answer that I give for all these venues when we don't know. And maybe I end up being proven wrong here, but I can't imagine being the number 1 player in expected total driving in my model would be bad for any venue. Like that seems like that's a good fit no matter, like I can't be that off base. So I'm going to hope that the driver propels him. And he's also number 2 in my model for weighted scoring. So that kind of jumps down the board a little bit and we can talk about him later. But the point of that was those are all the favorites that I just mentioned. And that's what makes this so difficult.
Right. And Mitchell, I think Mitchell, and there's another player that I'll bring up later. Like my main concern is playing 4 rounds of golf that are good. I think that, there's like a little bit of volatility with him and, I could be completely wrong, but even with Rose, I think with Rose, I did bet him outright. I'm admitting it. I did that based off form. I think that he has just been cruising since Pebble. I like what he's doing right now. And again, like if you're I got to pick my poison at some point because I obviously am not going to have nothing on this tournament. It's just not going to happen. He was someone that I fell to, but let's get into some of these smasher passes. They're probably going to be disgusting. We also had a lot of people withdraw. That did not help a lot of what I did like too. I started last week. I'll let you start this week. What's your first smasher pass?
Yeah, there were a couple withdrawals that really unfortunately decimated my card. There was a head-to-head bet that I wanted to make, and that was going to be my favorite play. Like that was more in that like 7-8% edge that I had. And when that got removed, like this whole card kind of spiraled. I wanted to fade Luke List. He pulled out of the tournament. I would have loved to have backed Ben on in some capacity here. He pulls out of the event. Joseph Bramlett, I'd give the same answer for. So there were a lot of unfortunate scenarios that we ran into, or at least I ran into, for where, yes, we had a lot of players pull out, but I almost batted like 1,000 here with every single withdrawal being something that just ruined my betting card. I'm going to ask you this one though, and then I will give my answer on it. Smash or pass on Taylor Pendrith?
Every week I have the name that kind of like pops up to me and I just out of arrogance ignore. He is one of them. I actually don't hate it this week. Where are you looking to, like, what kind of play are you looking to have on him though? Like, is this a DFS thing? Is this a positional? Like, where are you going?
So I switched it up a little bit this week.
Okay.
I am looking to pass on him.
Okay.
And I really loved Ben Griffin over him in a head-to-head matchup.
Okay.
And when Ben Griffin pulled out of this tournament, this whole thing spiraled on me. Like that was the wager I was talking about that I really wanted. Yeah. So I've been in a spot right now where I can't figure out what is the optimal way to take Taylor Pendrith on. I know the recent form has turned around for him recently. 3 made cuts in his last 4. I worry a little bit about how he fits for this venue. Like the head-to-head that I have right now, and I do not feel great about it. And that's kind of why I asked the question in this sense, rather than asking about the player that I'm backing here. I took Brendan Todd minus 110 over Pendrith. And I worry about Todd's withdrawal last week. That's something that has to at least be mentioned. Now, he was in last place, Stephie, or like near last place.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's him just trying to get the hell out of the tournament and move on. And like,
yeah,
I mean, he's not making the cut at that point. I really like the way that he fits for this venue. I wish that the form wasn't so disastrous even before him pulling himself out of the tournament last week. But I don't know. I had some red flags with Pendrith that I saw. Like, a lot of it comes down to the strokes gained total. He's outside the top 100 of my model there. So I'm trying to find a way to take him. I don't know if Todd was necessarily, like, to me, that was the best answer. Maybe at the book that you have, you can find a better choice out there that has a little bit more safety to it. But if it wasn't for what Todd has done recently, I really do believe this is a good course fit for him.
Yeah, it's funny because that was going to be my next smash or pass. I get, like, looking past last week, I agree with you. Like, I think this is a beautiful course fit for him where, like, I'm okay, you know, at plus 100 for a top 30. I'm okay with that. Like, I think that if, you know, looking past that, if you think he does fit the way that I think he does, you know, he's going to hit a lot of fairways. He is good putting on bent grass. He's gained strokes on approach in 5 of his last 7 starts. Like, there's still things to like about it. I see where the concern is, but that's also why he's 101 to win this event, right? So he's not someone that I'm going to go out and bet outright, but do I think that there's probably value if he is going to come out here and find success? Like, a top 30 for this course for Brendan Todd shouldn't be that difficult for him.
See, that's where I think it's interesting of what you just noted there in a general sense of the answer. A lot of these concerns are already baked into all the prices for him. I legitimately believe in the outright market, he might have been pushing, 55, 60 to 1 if it's not for what happened last week with him. So I think a lot of that's already baked into the number. And when you can get that answer, like, he's going to be volatile if he pulls out of the tournament. And that's what makes a head-to-head with him so dangerous, that if he pulls out, like, you just lose the entire bet no matter what Pendrith is doing. And that's the one thing that scares me the most about that wager that I just talked about, that at least leaves me, like, having a lot of trepidation to it. But I think if Todd hits, he can hit in a big way here. And I don't know if we necessarily know. I don't want to use last week as an example for a lot of these players. Like, I think you can kind of see that with my answer with Cameron Young and, Todd withdrew, which is a different answer to it. But that was a really weird tournament that kind of generated a very difficult output for a lot of players in the field. So I'm fine considering Todd. And when I said there was 13 players that graded inside the top 50 for all of the numbers that I ran, Todd would technically be the biggest long shot of the group who was on that list. So it's interesting that he kind of fit into that same range with all those high-end guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. I was just double checking to make sure this player didn't withdraw because he sounds like someone that would. Eric Cole, I don't believe, has withdrawn, right?
No, he is still in it. Although he has played so many weeks in a row.
I know.
I thought he was going to withdraw.
I was just waiting for it, especially when, I don't know, Ben Griffin, once, like, he's one of those, I just felt like his name was going to pop up at some point. But since it is not, let's see where you're at with him. Which way angle do I want to take in this? Okay, how about we do it this way? Eric Cole, smash or pass. He's a lot in DFS, huh? I'm going to actually, don't love that. Okay, how about top 30 plus 125?
I like Eric Cole this week. From a statistical perspective, he's 12th overall in my model. He's inside the top 15 of every single way that I ran it. And that's probably, like, the best way to play him is in something like that, because he is very, very popular on DraftKings. Like, I see him nearly 17% in my model, which would put him as the 9th highest owned guy. And I believe that is the highest owned player. I'm scrolling through it right now. I think that's the highest owned player in the 7,000s or less. So there's a lot of people that like him. That worries me a little bit for DFS, specifically because now we're talking about a golfer that is making his 7th consecutive start in a row, plus a US Open qualifier. At some point, he might hit a wall here, but I'm fine taking this as a placement bet and kind of ignoring a little bit of that maybe on the DraftKings side of things. And, if he burns you there, and you kind of can create your equity that you're building into it in a placement bet. But no, the numbers really like him, and he's a golfer that every single week just continues to pop for me.
Yeah, and, it's concerning that he's been playing, but he's also been, like, awesome over his last 10 starts too. There's so much to like, and I think his irons and putter are actually a nice match for this tournament and kind of what we're expecting. You look at 4 top 24 finishes over his last 6 starts. Like, he's in a good spot, and I think maybe that's with him. Maybe he is just trying to keep the momentum during the season. I literally just lost my total. What I've been doing is lately, I've been doing these parlays where I take a finishing position. Like 3 guys that I like that, it's not top 10s. It's nothing like that. And I'm having success with those lately. So he's someone that will probably find his way into like one of these weird, like top 20, top 30, top 40 parlays. But why don't you give me your next smash or pass?
I mean, it's going to get gross for me just pretty much throughout the rest of this card. Because I mean, like other than I have Burns, Young, Mitchell as outrights, and that's the outright card for me. I mean, that's a pretty heavy stack at the top there.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of question marks that we don't know a bunch about. So I guess let's pair them together here and we'll smash or pass them. You can do it individually here, but Ludvig Aberg, Michael Thorbjornsen. Thorbjornsen's an amateur. Aberg's making his first professional start here. Smash or pass on the 2 of those?
So Aberg is annoying because I thought I was, you look around, he's becoming kind of a hot commodity because you just saw what Rose did last week. I think I'm in as far as I don't have an opinion on them that strongly.
The problem is I have very limited data on both of these players. Aberg, even with the limited stats that I had, graded 10th overall for me. He might be like the PGA Tours version. I don't want to say of Rose necessarily. Like he kind of reminds me of what Tom Kim did last year. Maybe where he might enter the PGA Tour and just get hot really fast. And I would not be surprised if he wins a tournament and all of a sudden it's like, wow, he's the next coming of Tiger. And then, at some point, like we've seen Tom Kim go the other direction with it. But I think Aberg is extremely talented. So I'll buy him. And then I legitimately have absolutely no statistical data on Thorbjornsen, which is a tongue twister in itself to say that name.
God, I'm not the one saying it because we wouldn't
go. There was a price out there, and I think that this is something that was noteworthy, and I don't know if it's still available on FanDuel. It opened up for a top 40 at plus 240. I recommended it in my article at plus 220. I see that price at most books at like plus 100, plus 110, plus 120. At some of these sharper markets, he's moved down to like 60 or 70 to 1 to win this event. I don't know. Sometimes this is just number grabbing and chasing a movement of like, I have no data, so I can't necessarily go the opposite way here and say like, I like it or dislike it. But if you're going to tell me a guy is 100 points off from the rest of the market at one of these books, like, I guess I'll close my eyes and hope for the best on a golfer that has been good. He's 21 years old. In the limited starts that he's had, though, like a 4th place in that Dubai Desert Classic this season, 20th place finish last year in a tournament on the PGA Tour. I mean, that's probably 20 years old at that point, or if he was 21, he had just turned 21. So he's already shown success. I think he's a really talented kid that Aberg's obviously the one that got the tour card from being the number 1 player in college. Thorbjornsen is only a junior this year. I would think it's pretty likely that he's going to be the one that might get it next year. We might see him on tour as like a full-time player within the next, 12 to 15 months here. I'm just going to try to jump on a spot where I thought it was a mispriced number, but I mean, this is a complete number grab. I have nothing to say other than like, we've seen the success before and the number looked really enticing.
My next couple are going to be I'll save the really gross one for the end. But 2 names that I have talked about the last 2 weeks. And I'm not going to butcher his name this time. But Batia, top 20, plus 400. What are your thoughts? And I recognize some of this to the viewers at home. Some of this is becoming a little bit of an obsession. We see on the show sometimes. I am slightly obsessed with him. But I think there's reasons to also like him as well.
Have you seen those pictures of him where his shirt's off and he's like swinging out? Yeah. Like that's the most badass picture I've ever seen of a golfer before.
Well, I found out that he met his girlfriend by like duetting her TikTok, like slid into her. I don't even know. He's just cool.
She caddied on his bag when he won the.
So cool. Like it's just everything about him is cool. Like and I don't think he's one of those guys. I bet he doesn't even realize that he's like cool. Like I just want to have a beer with him. I want to hang out with him. I'm not a quitter. I'm going to ignore his iron play like entirely last week. Like, I don't want to talk about it, but he's another one where he seems to have like, he's a bad round away from like actually potentially winning something. Like, give me a putting contest here of some sort. He's top 10 in birdies or better gained, which I think is a little bit of an advantage here, like we talked about and alluded to earlier in the show. But across the board, like there's some really strong statistical things to like about him. You just really have to ignore what he did with his iron play last week.
Yeah, he's another one of those kids that is going to be a massive success. And I mean, he's already kind of proven that already, but he's another 21-year-old that is continuously, since he's entered the PGA Tour now, he's producing. He's maybe not top 10ing these tournaments, but he's making cuts. The statistical data looks amazing. Like you talked about, he's number 3 in my model for overall birdie or better percentage. I worry a little bit about his ability to make putts from 5 to 15 feet, but 24th in my model. I mean, he's a $7,200 price golfer on DraftKings. That's going to be a value based off of that answer.
Yeah.
He should technically be a value in any of those placement markets that you're looking for. And I kind of like the idea of shooting him up the board in like a top 20 rather than trying to play it in a safer route for a top 40 with it. Like, I think if he hits in a big way. And then if he burns you with any parts of those games that just doesn't click necessarily. And I have an answer where we'll get to in a second, that I'm going to take a golfer that I probably in retrospect probably should have recommended this guy as a top 20. Although, I mean, making a cut might be difficult, but we can get to that later. But yeah, I like Batia. I think he's an intriguing play moving forward also.
Yeah. And it's funny because I at least like when I did this with Grillo, I was happy that I had chosen to take that like top 20 route because I would have really kicked myself had I not. But who do you have next?
All right, I guess let's just get really gross with this. And I think I've asked you about this guy before and it probably did not work out. So we'll try again. Justin Lauer, top 40 plus 300.
I mean, sometimes Spence, like everyone needs someone rooting for them the way that Spencer will. I don't have an opinion, but if you convince me, I can get some action on him somewhere.
In retrospect, and this is the player I was talking about, it's a very boom or bust answer here. And I think when you get this boom or bust answer now at 3-1, I think there's value to be had. He was inside the top 40 of my model. He graded as a golfer that I understand he's not producing top 40s last season. And that's the concern here. But we've seen him have success recently, like the last 2 tournaments, not so much with the irons, but a couple made cuts in his last handful of tournaments. I think the success has turned around for him a little bit. The putter's gotten hot recently. If he can just find a way to merge that putter in the approach play, which my model thinks is possible here, maybe the best way to play this would have been a top 20 at like 8.5 to 1, because at least if you do that, like it's such a limited exposure bet that when he misses the cut and he comes in dead last place, you kind of like chalk it up and you really had nothing to it. Like you could put 1/10 of a unit on it and you really didn't have to get much down to like get a sweat out of it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. A little bit more exposure that has to be done when you take it at 3-1 for a top 40. But I am going to go the top 40 route here just because the overall rank was so good in my model. The safety, massive problem. He drops outside the top 80 for me. That's not something you necessarily want to see for the safer sort of, top 40 bets, head-to-head wagers, things of that nature, because upside is done in the sense of outrights and top 10s and top 20s. Like it's not done as a top 40 bet, but I thought at 3-1, there was still enough value in the number that I'd rather go that way because, I mean, Lauer's not necessarily competing for top 20s. So for him, like the upside finish might actually be a 34th place sort of result. So I don't know. It's gross.
I'm going to do it. That's fine. And we'll go through this one quick because I'm sure we're both running out of these. It's funny. There's actually 2 names that we haven't brought up that I might have to fire off to you quick. But this guy is another guy that keeps coming up every single week. And I'm just going to continue. I'm just going to ride the wave because I've been doing it the last couple of weeks. I'm going to continue to do it with Chez Reavie. And I want to know your opinions on him for this week. How are we feeling? Because, again, a guy that's just kind of doing his thing. I'll let you talk before I make my case because I know every week you're not really a huge fan.
Well, he disappointed me last week. I had a big bet on him in the top.
Exactly what we said last week. Actually, like almost verbatim, I'm pretty sure we said he's probably going to be T40 again, and he was T40 again.
We've talked a lot about like he was kind of in that range for me as a golfer that was going to come like 25th to 50 somethingth. And like I kind of think that's where he lands again. Like he's 48th in my model. He's 36th for safety. I mean, I don't know how you can say anything bad about that for some of these prices that you have to pay. I don't know what the upside is. It is so minimal. This is a top 40 wager and it's maxed out on there. I mean, if you find the right head-to-head opponent, sure. Yeah. Like if you could find me somebody near the bottom of the board, I'd be fine taking Reeve in a head-to-head matchup, but it's more of those sort of an answers than trying to shoot it up further. So I will say, I guess, smash on a top 40. Like, I think that's fine.
Okay. Do you have another one or do you want me to fire a couple more to you?
I can give you some random names here. I don't technically have anybody else that I have on a card, but
do you have any feelings on Ryan Gerard at all?
He was a guy that my model loved.
Oh, really? Okay. That's the name I thought you were going to be disgusted by. Let's talk about it.
Well, I mean, that's as boom or bust as can get. And it's such a limited sample size that I don't know if I necessarily trust my data on him, but like if you're trying to just throw random darts, like to me, that's the better way to play this tournament in general. Yeah. Like we can still get wagers down, but if we're saying that there's not a ton of value on this board, I'd rather take these shots with these like Justin Lowers and Ryan Gerards and these guys that you can get at like these 3-1, 4-1, 5-1 sort of numbers, or even if you push them higher up on the board, because
even like top 20, he's looking at like plus 900 right now or something crazy. You know, he just qualified for the US. I think he's just hot right now. So it's more so I'm just riding what he just did recently, like getting that course record and having the ace and on 12 like he did. But so I'm just going with it. And this is usually the type of thing where I avoid these type of like emotional moments. But for me and this situation and the type of field that we're in, like, I don't know that I'm going to get there as far as top 20 goes. But again, if you're going to do like a dart throw, like that's the type of name where it's like, when we go back and look at the standings, like, oh, he finished like T25. Like that's not totally shocking.
No, and it's gross. And it's like, I mean, I
don't feel good about it.
No, and you're more likely than not going to lose the wager. And I think that's like the most important thing for everybody to keep in mind, that these are not 50-50 propositions that we're talking about. Like you said, whether you get there or not, he's 10-1 to come inside the top 20.
Right. Like, and there's a reason for that. Like odds are, I think people overthink it sometimes. We're like, the odds are the odds a lot of the time for a reason. And yes, we look for a value, but like, there's a reason why someone is getting that top 20 value is because they're also 110-1 to win the event. So for them, that's, the stretch is massive.
Yeah. And it's like, when you look at these guys, like really the difference, look, you have situations here and there where a guy could be 10-1 to come in the top 20, and you might have the biggest difference in your model that you've ever seen before. Most scenarios, like, the difference is going to be that, like, he should have been 8.5-1, 9-1. Like, they're very small margins in these spots. Like, you're very rarely going to find the bet where a guy's 10-1 and he's like, at that point, that's just a mispricing of a book. Like, I think that's the important thing to keep in mind. Like, there's been a couple scenarios over the course of time. Like, there was one with Justin Suh in a Vegas tournament 2 or 3 years ago where I can't remember what I had him at and what I got him at, but like, whatever the price was, like he was hypothetically 8-1 to come in the top 20, and I had him at like 2-1 as the proper price. That's such a rare answer to give on these shows. Like it's usually a very small difference. So as we're saying, it's a dart throw. Just be very careful if you make these bets. Like they're I don't know what anybody's units are. Like that's an answer that only people can answer, but it's a very small percentage of whatever your units are on these wagers.
Yeah, 100%. All right, why don't you throw one more at me? I'm gonna stay with some of these like absolutely heinous ones, but I could have one more after this before we go into underrated, overrated, which we probably should just speed through because it should be fairly simple for this one.
We can go with what Sam just said of Michael Block.
I forgot he was even. I literally forgot this guy fucking existed. I'm not even kidding you. Thank you, Sam, for reminding me that I should probably bet him to miss the cut. I don't have any strong feelings. I think that we saw, he was who we thought he was. Like, I mean, at least maybe in this field, it might be a little bit different. But I don't. You guys are in love with feel-good stories. Enough with the feel-good bullshit.
I like him better this week than the last tournament.
Yes, and that I agree with.
Like, I thought he was the worst player in the tournament when I was betting him to miss the cut. Like, out of 156 players, he's 119th for me this week. Like, that's not a good answer, but that's not dead last.
Like, even like a top 40 plus 650, I don't even know if that's like
I don't have any intrigue.
There's nothing really sexy about that. You're not getting, because it's still everyone's so in love with you. Really, like, these numbers are kind of hilarious, quite frankly. Like, even top 20, it's 20-1 is not really what you would expect almost.
Yeah, it's almost impossible. Like, it's the feel-good story that you're talking about. It's the built-in change of the price that we know that people are going to want to put them or put him on a card. And anytime that like a sports book is pricing golfers, like, I would love to have, and this is like the one thing that would make golf so much better. If we could have two-way markets in a lot of these situations, like, I know I could bet him to miss the cut, and I'm not going to. Like, I don't necessarily think, like, I don't even know what the price is, to be honest.
I don't even know if they have. I'm not even seeing anything right now on the market, or at least
I would assume as a guess, he's probably minus 500, minus 600, minus 700, I guess. But like, I have no interest in laying that much juice. Like, if he makes the cut, congratulations, good for him. We've had so many people pull out that the bottom of this board is a lot weaker, and that's kind of one of the reasons why he slightly.
What did he end up shooting that round one?
I don't know. He's bad.
Like, he almost played as bad of golf as I do. Like, it was really bad. But is there another? What's this? Do you feel Harbor Town will be a similar course comp this week? Where are you at with this, Spence?
I'm not necessarily the biggest comp course guy. Like, I run everything from an individual sense with it, and I try not to necessarily look at it. I mean, I don't know. It's a difficult answer to give because I don't know if I think from the looks of the course, it does seem like there's going to be a lot of forced layups, which would technically give you that Harbor Town feel to it.
Yeah.
So I guess based off of that answer, there's a possibility of it. But look, I mean, who knows? Like, yeah, I hear 4 to 6 inch rough. It wouldn't shock me if all of a sudden, and this is where like a Pendrith fade on my part could just become disastrous. If all of a sudden he can use his driver and bomb it out there and the rough isn't as penal as I thought it was, like, if you take that approach of a bomb and gouge mentality, like, this whole course flips upside down. And that's what scares me about trying to compare it to anything or even to run a model on it. It's a super difficult tournament to try to assess because we just have literally nothing to base this off of.
Yeah, and I think you can go down like a really dangerous rabbit hole of like trying to rely too heavily on these course comps and then it going a totally different direction, that things get really gross and end up being very tragic for you. I'll give you one more smash or pass. I don't know that I lean very heavily on either sides of these. Lowry over Fleetwood minus 110. Also wanting to talk about some of these players that I see, are all over everyone's cards. Where are you at with the Lowry over Fleetwood? Smash or pass?
I would take the other side of it. Probably. I'd probably take Fleetwood. I think like the best way to play Lowry is probably as a matchup, but I don't know. Like, my numbers liked Fleetwood this week, so it's not a massive edge one way or another. Like, as an overall rank, Fleetwood was 5th, Lowry was 17th. That is a big enough difference that it's going to ever so slightly make Fleetwood a number when I run it from the back end of a head-to-head wager there. When I ran this for upside, Fleetwood kind of stood pat where he was. He went up a little bit, but Lowry all of a sudden went to 29th. And then when you ran it for safety, 4th and 12th. So I don't know. I mean, if you force me to choose, like, I think the two players in, and I'll just give this as like a DraftKings answer, of the $9,000 plus range, probably Theegala and Lowry would be my two least preferred plays, but we're still talking about top 30 options that I think there's relative safety with most of those names. And maybe I'm viewing this too much as an upside answer right now, which isn't how you should view a head-to-head.
And when I picked Fleetwood and your daddy, he had a miscut and then lost like 0.6 strokes off the tee and like 3.5 on approach. Like, I I recognize where like everyone is very like high on him this week. I just maybe again like hurt my feelings just slightly too much. And last week I was very negative about Lowry, but he's kind of his like the level of play with his iron, they're like starting to seduce me back a little bit. I'm flirting with the idea of him. Seems like a good fit, but I haven't been able to totally trust it. We like a little bit of a pulse back out of his putter too. So like I'm warming up to the idea. I don't know that I feel confidently enough to be like, yeah, take Lowry over Fleetwood. But from what?
I was going to say, I'll tell you what on that. Like if this course plays 15 under instead of 25 under and it goes more in that direction of what like people are talking about, that feels like a really ideal setup. Like the one thing that brought Lowry down in my model was some of his ability to make birdies and his opportunities, like his lack of opportunities that he would create because, or I guess he could create the opportunity, but he was missing so many putts that brought him down in my model. Like if this winning score is 15, 16 under, which in fairness, I would say that's a very similar answer for Fleetwood, that it also helps him. And I think that's why, like, for me, it's just a stay away between those two because they kind of possess that same answer there. And I trust the floor from Fleetwood a little bit more from the unknown commodities that we do have. But I'm not going to sit here and say that Lowry cannot find success. He's the number one player in my model when combining off the tee and approach. I just don't know if he can make enough putts. But if all of a sudden this is like a 13 under winner, he could win this tournament, or all of a sudden he could, shoot 8 under par and Fleetwood shoots 5 under par.
Yeah.
I just think it's going to be a made cut versus made cut battle. And those always worry me a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. We can go to underrated, overrated, probably breeze through these a little bit faster than normal. Where are you at with overrated player for this week?
I should have prepared this before we started.
I know. I didn't either, honestly. And I passed it to you first, selfishly, which was quite rude of me to do. I think it's probably someone towards the top of the board. I just don't know exactly where I land. I know that everyone is all over Corey Connors. My thing is, like, I think everyone's ignoring Svensson because of Corey Connors. Like, and there's more than one Canadian here, and I know we all want a Canadian to win.
Hadwin too. I like
Hadwin too. Yes, I agree. And I think that, I have my griefs with Corey Connors. Everyone that watches the show knows that. I don't want to say that any of them are necessarily overrated because I have seen like quite the disbursement of like bets on cards this week.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's tough. Like I said, the pricing's pretty optimal on the top, and that's what makes these boards difficult. I guess to give an answer here, though, I'll say Nikolai Højgaard is overrated for me. Does not grade well in my model. Limited sample size of data that I have. I know he's been great, and he's a young player. He's another one of those guys that I'd fit into this mold of. Give this 3, 4, 5 years, and I would not be shocked if Højgaard ends up becoming a top 10 or 15 player in the world. But he's played a lot of golf recently. I mean, he's spaced out his starts, but he's playing on the PGA Tour now for like the first time week in and week out, and he's trying to make the most of his opportunity of his the temporary card that he has there. So I'm gonna say I
don't like him. I don't know. I'm a sucker to these like guys like this, which is funny because I yell at everyone for not getting emotional, but like I kind of like him over McNeely this week is something that I was looking at, trying to have more on my card than not. I'm just gonna go to like underrated. I think everyone is kind of looking past Fitzpatrick, which I think is getting a little bit rude at this point. Like there is a reason that he is, his price is 14-1 for a reason. He is still one of the best golfers in the world. And we're just continuously like ignoring that for some reason. So I'm actually in on Fitzpatrick after I did like a little bit more research. And I understand where the concerns are. I 100% get it. I also think Fitzpatrick is someone that was very vocal about the live stuff. Don't let those guys come back. Don't let them play on tour. So maybe he gets a little, in his head over everything going on. But I actually ended up placing an outright bet on him because I think at this point, it's starting to get disrespectful. I felt this way with Hovland last week, or, week after week, some of these guys are just kind of getting ignored. Justin Thomas was one of them, but he also is proving to maybe deserve that very much. So, how do you feel about Fitz?
I like Fitzpatrick. Yeah. I agree with, I'm not going to say everything that you just said again, because I agree with pretty much everything that you've just talked about right now. This is a situation to me where, yeah, the price is hard to bet. It's the same answer that I gave for Cameron Young. Like these prices are hard to bet, but I would not be shocked if Matthew Fitzpatrick won this golf tournament. So, and I don't really hear very many people giving that answer. He's kind of the forgotten about guy on outright cards, at least from what I've seen. Like I've seen very, like he's popular on DFS. I think deservedly so on it. Very intriguing play though, specifically if you can find him in different matchups or as a head-to-head bet or an outright bet. And there's a lot of different ways to play it here. So for me, it's probably like if I was to power rank the players that I'd want the most exposure to in some way, whether this is DFS or betting, it would probably be Cam Young, Sam Burns, Fitzpatrick third.
I'm interested to see what his ownership ends up being. Honestly, it'll be very interesting. Who do you have underrated? Not that there's too many options to probably pick from, depending how gross you want to get.
No, I'll keep it somewhat normal. I'll go to a player that does not have a lot of ownership around him. So I'm going to kind of use that answer above anything else. I think the price tag that you have to pay for him on DraftKings is fair. I think most people would say that he's overpriced, which is the reason why he's going so under the table right now with it. I would say from an outright number, and I've talked about him already, that there's value to be had with him. But I'm going to say Keith Mitchell. I think sub 10% for a golfer that really does possess upside in this tournament with the way that he can strike the ball. I'm going to take a shot with him in any market that we can really talk about here. I think he's intriguing as a matchup. He's intriguing as an outright. He's very intriguing for DFS because of the lack of ownership. So sub 10% play on him. And I was hoping my answer was going to be Cameron Young, but the ownership on him went wild, like wild the last 24 hours.
Yeah, 100%. I'm with you on that. I can get behind that. I think one name that I was just thinking of too, as you were chatting, is Lipsky is also interesting. I think that he does this. He kind of like heats up. It's like these weird like couple weeks where he does good. And I think he's kind of in that right now where like, I mean, I'm looking at another kind of a top 20 plus 360, probably within the realm of something that he can do. I think he just had a T16 at Charles Schwab. Like there's things to like about him too. Just a random, like underrated. I'm not telling you to bet him outright. I do not think he is winning this tournament, but before we do Who's Your Daddy, we didn't mention two names that we used to talk about a lot on the show. I think it's because we're over it. And every week we come up with some type of answer to get these guys. And you probably know one direction that I'm going, and it's Alex Smalley.
Yeah.
And again, we've always said like he's going to have one of these tournaments where we're not going to talk about him a lot. It's going to be a weaker field, and he's going to break through. I don't see it though as far as this week goes. Where do you stand?
Markets love him. Like the sharper markets absolutely love him. He's a favorite in a lot of matchups. I've seen the odds moving in his favor. I'm lower on him this week than I normally am. I think there's enough reason from what I've seen from influential money that I'm not going to sit here and say that he's out of my player pool for DFS. Like I'm fine considering him. He's, inside the top 40 of my models. So he's kind of in that like borderline fringe range of where value is, but results have looked decent lately. I think he's turning around. He's another player that when he got cold, he got really cold and missed a bunch of cuts, and he seems to be turning it around now. And I love his ball striking. So I've always said that his best chance to win a golf tournament would be when he has 2 par 5s. Like he has 3 this week, but maybe because they're so easy, that might help him. Like his scoring in other places will be so good that if he can just be, neutral or better on the par 5s, that he can pay off whatever the price tag is. So I'm going to say that I'm, in on him. I'm not necessarily like pounding the table to play him, but I'm fine with Smalley.
Yeah, I'm talking myself into him too. And then, okay, last one, and I swear we'll get to Who's Your Guy, even though you probably don't even want to do that segment anyways today.
Yeah, fuck that.
Austin Smotherman, where are we at here? Because I'm looking at the numbers, and he might be getting like slightly, I don't want to say disrespected because he's not necessarily playing fantastic, but I think there's a world where he probably lives in a lot of my DFS lineups. Not a lot. A lot is a stretch. Quite a few.
You want to play a game really quickly with some of these names? I'll wrap
a game that you're going to win, but okay, let's play a game.
I'm going to rapid fire off names here.
Okay.
Just simple yes or no to them.
If I like them or I don't like them.
Yes, exactly. Just as simple as that.
Fine.
And I'll run it down to the last name that you just said here.
Okay.
And this will get us some more players to talk about. Aaron Wise, yes or no?
Yes.
I'm going to say yes, too, because of his upside. Vincent Norman, yes or no?
No.
I'm going to say yes. I do have trepidation with some of his ability to make putts and the ownership, but my model really liked him. Yeah. Brandon Wu, yes or no?
God. Actually, yes, surprisingly.
I'm going to say no on Brandon Wu. I actually thought he was a really good person to fade. Like, I missed the bet, unfortunately. Vincent Norman over Brandon Wu was probably the wager to make when it was minus 110. Now it's minus 135. So that's kind of moved past the point where I want to play it. But I thought 125, 130 was the proper value there. You talked about Lipsky. I'm going to say yes to Lipsky also. Yeah. I think that he's an intriguing play. Ben Martin, yes or no?
These freaking guys with 2 first names that I end up liking. I'm actually going to say no for once. I usually am very high on him, though.
I am going to say yes, although I'm not really sure what the best way to play him is. I don't love the ownership on DraftKings. Maybe it's like a 59th or better sort of a bet if you shop around and find that.
Like, I don't hate him. I just don't know what I don't necessarily know what to do with him this week.
Sure. I think that makes sense. And like, that's to me, like, I mean, if you have Bet365, he's 59th or better there. Like, that's the book you can find it at. Yeah. Essentially make a cut and do a little bit better than that. Yeah. Then the last couple, we'll do 2 more and then we will get to the end of this. Just trying to talk on some of these popular names here. Yeah. Carson Young, yes or no?
Yes.
I hate the ownership for DFS. I think he's playable in other iterations of the market.
I actually didn't expect so many people to like him this week. Like, I thought that was going to be a little bit more of a sneaky play, but obviously I was very mistaken.
Yes. CT Pan.
I always like CT Pan. I'm always going to say yes. Yes, CT Pan.
I'm going to say yes to CT Pan. And then the last one, Austin Smotherman, you already talked about him. I am also going to say yes to Austin Smotherman. I think it is a volatile play. I think he could very well miss the cut. I think the upside numbers present a really intriguing possibility that you could potentially bet this as like a top 20 sort of wager.
Yeah, I'm honestly with you on that. And I think, I mean, even Smotherman, what is he even looking at to be
top? Got to be a good number, I would think. Like, it's probably a good price.
Plus 650. I mean, I think that there's actually maybe slightly some value on that, as long as he, but he's a player. Like, we say this every time we talk about him, like, he's very, very volatile. So it could either go one way and he finishes T15, or it goes another way and he misses. Like, with him, but I'm expecting that. But I think that the ceiling there is nice.
Look at the results that he's produced. 21st, miscut, 5th, 67th, miscut. Like, when he hits, he hits. And when he doesn't, he misses the cut. So I think as a top 20 at 6.5 to 1, I am completely fine with anybody who wants to take a shot on that.
I like it. Should we do Who's Your Daddy?
Let's do it. This is the week that I am coming back.
Did you beat me last week?
Who did I have last? Oh, no, I have Rom. I did beat you last week, but very limited.
All right, so you're not quite back in the game. I will let you take your first pick here as a, the loser's prize or whatever you want to call it. You can take the first advantage of picking who you want.
You weren't going to take this golfer anyway, so I'm on my own island on this play. Cameron Young is going to make everything that's happened this year turn around for me in this contest. These are famous last words of somebody who is ready to just absolutely implode and never play this contest again. But this is the week, Stephie. This is when it all turns around. This is the father who is going to get me back in the contest.
All right. Maybe. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. I hope for you that you get back in. Actually tempted to use Rory here, but I'm not going to, because I would like a little bit more Rory exposure, even though this is a fake game and it's not necessarily having exposure. But you know what?
I don't know who this is fake to. This feels very real to me.
It's very real. It's an ego thing. I'll take Matthew Fitzpatrick, actually. Let's do it. I don't foresee me taking him probably later on. I don't, I'm okay with being the person that roots for the guy that no one is right now. So I'll go Matthew Fitzpatrick. And I think we could not have covered more names in this show. We even got to Michael Block. So I think we did a very good job covering it all.
I told you, like, even though we thought this was going to be a 30-minute show, there's no way you're putting us on a show together and it's going to be less than an hour. So very good show, Stephie. I appreciate everything as always. And I guess the one thing that I'll just add to Fitzpatrick very quickly is if this does have Harbor Town feel to it, which I mean, I don't know one way or another. I mean, Fitzpatrick at Harbor Town, I mean, that sounds like a good fit for this tournament. So you might be on to something with that one and done pick. And unfortunately, it's so difficult to get back in this contest because I don't think you've made one choice yet where I've been like, I hate that pick that you've made. And when every single pick is like somewhat optimal, like, I don't know how to get back in this contest. Like, I'm going to need a victory from somebody.
You'll get there. You'll get there. Maybe. I don't know. All right, everyone, good luck on your bets. Weird week, but let's have some fun. Good luck. See ya.